All right, folks, we're going to try this a second time. Not sure exactly what happened here, but it appears that we did lose the live stream on YouTube. Twitter was still going just fine. Not exactly sure what happened here on YouTube, but we're going to try this one again. And let's see if we can get it working. Are we back? Are we back? Chat, can everybody let me know on YouTube if you can hear me loud and clear, if you can see me too? See, this is why I can't talk about $100 XRP, $1,000 XRP, $10,000 XRP. Right as I start talking about $1,000 XRP, this is what happens. I try to tell you guys, I'd love to talk about the high prices of XRP. For some reason, they take me out. Now, as we get started here with the second part 2 of the live show here tonight, thank you for all your support, by the way. If everybody could help us out by liking this stream, sharing it out far and wide. I do have the super chats from the last live show, so I'm going to address those real quick. All good? All good? This isn't AI. Nope, this is the real me. We started out with a massive super chat from Legend that apparently is missing now. Legend dropped like a fat stack of cash because he's a legend like that. And why do I not see it? Okay. But Legend, I see you dropped another one. If you could only pick one of these right now, which would you buy? Canton or Axelar for the biggest upside in 2026? Not financial advice, just your opinion. Yeah, guys, let's just go straight into the Q&A. Because basically, as the live show cut off, I was just talking about XRP going to $100, $1,000, $10,000. Not really any content that you were interested in at all. So we'll just go straight into the Q&A. Okay? How about that? Great question, Canton. I just picked up Canton and I just added to my Axelar bags. I do see more ROI on Axelar, personally. I'm not going to give you financial advice, Legend, but personally, I see more upside on Axelar than I do Canton. But I did just review Canton for the Discord community today, and so I could send you over that, Legend, if you wanted the full breakdown on that. My low targets and high targets on Canton, but Axelar, I do see more upside. And then I was tuning into the space today with Vet in the Common Prefix team, which is the new team that's taking lead development for Axelar. And they just announced on the space today that they're going to be integrating with Solana as well too. And so, yeah, I'm bullish on Axelar still. Like from what I've seen from the team that took over, very impressed. And despite the news that the team, is leaving to go to Circle, right? The main team that was building out Axelar, they're leaving to go to Circle. They got basically acquired by Circle. And it spread a lot of FUD, right? And it brought down Axelar to about 8 cents, maybe 7, I think only about 8 cents. Which funny enough was actually a level that I thought that it could pull back to if that Japan carry trade unwind smacked us up. That was actually a level I was looking for it to go to. And so I think that there's more upside on Axelar. I'm very bullish on it. Very excited to see that they're still expanding, still cooking, still working with this new dev team. And honestly, it's healthy, right? If you get, some developers out of the ecosystem that maybe didn't care about it as much, right? The Axelar team, I don't really know who they are. I just know that they've now left to go work at Circle. And so maybe it's good, right? You get them out and you get some fresh blood in there and you can start to build something out. Yeah, I told you guys, I told you guys. Yes. Yeah. I told you guys, I started to talk about $100 and $1,000 and $10,000 XRP. The aliens came, they swooped me up. They're my handlers. My handlers hit me up and they said, Zach, you can't talk about that anymore. You're not allowed to talk about those prices anymore. But Legend, that's my answer. I just bought Canton though. I do think it can run to 30 cents at least. That's my low target on Canton. Bullish on it. Bullish. Need to see if these proof of concepts and testing actually correlates and materializes real partnerships and real use of the token. But without a doubt, they have institutional investment, institutional partners. They're at the table 100% for Canton. Absolutely. Can you please address the Lewis Jackson latest video? Yeah, and guys, by the way, you can start dropping your comments and questions down below. We're going to just go straight on into Q&A. XRP is down right now. XRP is down. It went down to about $1.84. Yeah, about $1.84. I'll give you a quick look at the chart real quick. But yeah, I'll be honest with you guys. I saw a bunch of people commented on my video earlier, Lewis's video. And so I went to go watch it. And I only watched the first few minutes of it. Maybe first 5-10 minutes of it. And I could kind of see the direction that he was going. And if I'm being honest with you guys, I had just had my lunch and I sat down on my couch downstairs. And I can't sit down on my couch in the afternoon or else I'm like nodding off. And so I literally nodded off. Like I almost like fell asleep. Like I was this close. And then I like woke up, snapped out of it. And then I went back upstairs and went back to work on my coin reviews. And so to be honest with you guys, I didn't finish the video, but I could see where he was going. The thing to understand is that ODL, we've already broken this down before. All of the on-demand liquidity transactions that Ripple has done have been through centralized exchanges and OTC desks. So the thing that's coming next is permission domains and permission dexes, which will allow Ripple and their institutional partners to build out those liquidity pools on the XRP ledger. But for now, all of that activity has been taking place OTC through centralized exchanges. So that's why it hasn't been impacting price. I don't know the premise of the rest of his video. I think that Lewis has kind of pulled back on some of his expectations for XRP as well. And that's fine. I think that we're all learning, and it's important for folks to understand where the value of XRP is going to be derived from. And this is a learning process for a lot of folks, and myself included. As we've gone through the years here, we've learned, okay, this doesn't work how we thought it was going to. Or in the case of the AMMs, Ripple and their partners won't start using the AMMs till they have permission dexes where they can tap into liquidity pools where everybody participating is KYC'd, AML, and compliant with all the banking laws. Right? There's such strict regulations around that it's not like these institutions are just going to come on the public network in public liquidity pools and start to just throw liquidity around. That's not how it's going to work. Does it mean that it's not going to drive value to XRP? No. Because remember, to build out those liquidity pools, you need to fund it with XRP, right? And if it's a liquidity pool between XRP and RLUSD, or as Ashish Burla said, one of his big predictions that I forgot to mention was he mentioned other stablecoins outside of US dollar stablecoins are going to explode in 2026. I happen to agree. I really think that that's going to be big in 2026. We're talking about the Japanese yen, right? What's the solution to the liquidity crisis over there and those bond yields going crazy? You implement stablecoins. They implemented the laws earlier this year that allow stablecoin issuers to back their currency, their stablecoin by 50% treasuries. That soaks up demand. That tames those bond market, those bond yields that are going crazy right now. So stablecoins are the solution. But to build out those liquidity pools, you still need to fund it with XRP, and you're going to need to fund it with those stablecoins. So you're still going to be, driving value to XRP. You're still going to be locking up supply in those liquidity pools. You have to understand that each one of those corridors, each one of those liquidity pools is locking up another portion of XRP. And so, I didn't watch the rest of this video. I'll go check it out, and I'll let you guys know what I think. But I do think that it's healthy for our space to understand what will drive value to XRP and what is not, how some of these work, right? I'll give you guys an example of something that I had put out earlier this year. And it was something that I said, I don't know how this is going to work. And what am I talking about? Where were the ETFs going to get their XRP from? Right? A lot of people have been asking me lately, Zach, what about your multiplier? You said 100x, 500x multiplier on these ETFs. Yes, I did. But I also added a caveat and I said, I didn't know, because we just didn't know whether or not the XRP was going to be purchased OTC or whether they were going to have to go to the secondary exchanges. So far, it's been all OTC. And Ripple's actually seeded some of that funding as well, too. That does not drive supply shock to XRP, right? So why is XRP not gone crazy off the ETF inflows? That's why. Now, I knew that it could be a possibility, but I wasn't going to say with 100% certainty that these will absolutely lead to a pump or that they're not going to lead to any price action at all because it's going to be all OTC. And if you've been paying attention, I shared that all of the inflows into Bitcoin ETFs were OTC, yet Bitcoin still pumped 220% from the day the ETFs went live to the October 2025 high this year. 220% price action to the upside despite all of the Bitcoin for the ETFs being purchased OTC. It's because somebody's purchasing Bitcoin somewhere. And even though there was 24 billion of outflows on centralized exchanges, it still pushed Bitcoin up. Same thing's going to happen for XRP, right? They're draining the OTC. They're draining the dark pools right now. And then the big caveat that I said, we got to see if they're picking it up OTC. And then we have to watch what Ripple does with the spigot. Right? That's the best example. Is Ripple going to turn that spigot on and let it flow out a little bit more as far as, getting that escrow and then selling it off to the ETF issuers? Or are they going to close that off? That's a variable I didn't know. And so far, about a month into the ETFs, it's been all OTC. And Ripple has seeded. They seeded about 100 million XRP into the 21 shares ETF. That does not drive supply shock. Not today, not this month. Now down the road, are ETFs going to have an impact? 1,000% because they're locking up XRP. Are the AMM liquidity pools going to have an impact on supply? Absolutely. Right? As XRP gets put into a liquidity pool between XRP and RLUSD, it can't be used for the liquidity pool between XRP and the Japanese yen. It can't be, as XRP gets put into DeFi, it can't be used for cross-border payments, liquidity pools, ETFs, right? There's only so much XRP to go around. The good news is that we're driving demand and that Ripple is the XRP that they are selling off is not driving price down, okay? But let's get back into it. I saw another super chat from Mrs. Claus asking about dark pools. Thank you for the super chat. So OTC and dark pools are very similar. OTC desks are basically you have a middleman, which is the OTC trading desk, which finds a buyer and a seller for any given asset, whether that be XRP, Bitcoin, or stocks. And it's a private market for institutional investors exclusively. The thing about dark pools is dark pools are more automated, right? OTC is, you get on the phone with the OTC desk and you say, hey, I want to buy 100 million XRP. And the OTC desk says, okay, I'm going to call up Ripple first. And after Ripple, I'm going to call up somebody else, right? And they're going to source that from somewhere else, from Ripple, from a centralized exchange. And that's going to be an OTC transaction that is not seen on the public order books on the centralized exchanges. And that's why the OTC and dark pool activity doesn't lead to price action today. Very important to understand. OTC and dark pools are very similar. OTC is more of a manual operation. Dark pools are a little bit more automated. That's a simple, dumbed down explanation for what they are. But just to get the point across, that's what it is, right? And so we need to watch and we need to see, what is Ripple going to do with this escrow going forward? They're going to turn that spigot up a little bit more. They're going to close it off. That's the big variable that I didn't know. I said, guys, if these ETF inflows come in and they have to buy through centralized exchanges, we're going to see some stupid, ridiculous multipliers. If Ripple is funding these ETFs, it's just not going to hit. And that's what we've seen for the first month is Ripple has been seeding some of them. And then the rest of the activity has been all OTC. Nobody knows how much is on the OTC and the dark pools. That's the whole point of them, is that you can remain anonymous. You can go place a big order without impacting the market, whether it be buying or selling. That's why these institutions use them. But remember, because I know some people might be hearing this and they're thinking, well, this sucks. This is bearish. This isn't good. There's only one thing that happens here. There's only two things that happen here. Either XRP stays low and these ETFs, these digital asset treasuries, and even folks like us just keep scooping up all this XRP and all that XRP supply gets soaked up, or price starts to go up and the accumulation can't happen as fast, right? Because price is moving too quickly for people to capture. But eventually, right, both scenarios lead to the price going up. Either all of the supply gets soaked up while price stays low, or price starts to move and basically the flywheel gets started and then folks get left behind. Either way, in both scenarios, it's leading to a higher price of XRP. It's locking up XRP supply, and we want to see that. We want to see XRP locked up in ETFs, digital asset treasuries. I've said this as the best example of making a joke out of it, but the memesters, the guys that invest 50,000 XRP in a fuzzy wuzzy penguin, that's locking up XRP in the fuzzy wuzzy. That's a stupid example, but it's reality. Literally. In the past year, since we've had meme coins, people have invested hundreds of thousands and millions of XRP in meme coins, in fuzzy wuzzy penguins. I'm bullish on XRP because people are locking it up in fuzzy wuzzies. But now I'm more bullish on the institutional adoption on ETFs and DATs. But all of it combined gets us to the one question that matters most. What's the real available float of XRP? Not the circulating supply. If somebody had $10 billion to come to the market right now, right? XRP, let's just say it's $2. You can buy 5 billion XRP. Is there 5 billion XRP available? No. And this is the question that matters most. What's the available float of XRP? When you get to that question, and when you start to add up the numbers, and it's all public blockchain. Now, you can't get the final tally, but you can start to add it up. And then you realize, wait, there's not 60 billion circulating supply. There's not 20 billion circulating supply. There's not even 10 billion circulating supply. And so if one institution shows up and wants to buy a billion XRP, 5 billion XRP, is that available float there? It's not. And some folks would say, well, they'll just go to Ripple. Ripple doesn't have that available either, right? They want to hold on to a portion for themselves. They have about 30 billion in the escrow, but the escrow only releases 1 billion per month. Insert our conversation about the pre-allocation contracts. If somebody does want to buy a billion XRP and they want to buy it from Ripple, Ripple then conducts deal like they did with R3 or other deals, right? Where you would get a pre-allocation, you get, 50 million per month, 100 million per month, and you're going to get that for 10 months. And there's your billion. You're not going to get it all today. It's going to take you a year. And really, I think that's what we've been witnessing for the past really almost a decade for XRP. As soon as XRP started to get institutional adoption, which institutional adoption for XRP goes all the way back to 2016 when they were partnering up with Bank of America and R3. The R3 deal was institutional adoption for XRP in 2016. R3 came to buy 5 billion XRP. And so this is why it's easy to say that there probably was at least a couple other pre-allocation contracts done and ongoing pre-allocation contracts that are getting signed. And furthermore, this is actually what tomorrow's video is going to be about. I have the Clarity Act printed out right here, and I encourage you guys to go check it out for yourself. Pages 103 to 105 gets into the no person, no affiliated person, no company, no issuer can have more than 20% of the token supply for it to be considered a mature blockchain. So this is when we get into the conversation of Ripple they have to distribute the XRP supply. They have to, because the Clarity Act says no one party can have more than 20%. Okay, let me get back in here and get back into rapid fire Q&A. Thank you guys for your support. My apologies that the YouTube stream cut out earlier. Appreciate your support, and let's go check here. We got some super chats that came in. Brolando, Jake still on par for $100 XRP by the end of the year. Joking, love the content. Keep doing what you're doing, Zach. Hope all is well. Happy holidays. Thank you. I appreciate the support. Appreciate all of you guys. Thank you so much. Like I said, as soon as I was literally talking about $100, $1,000, $10,000 XRP in the YouTube stream, the aliens came, my handlers, my intergalactic XRP handlers, they came down. They said, not today, Zach. The people aren't ready. The people aren't ready for you to talk about $1,000 XRP again. And they shut me down. We'll try again tomorrow. Brett, thank you. You don't think XRP will hit $100 till 2030? Do you think being used on the DTCC will impact $100 in 2026? Appreciate you and Merry Christmas. Brett, it's a good question. Right, DTCC, they just said themselves that it's not going to be one blockchain. It's not going to be the Canton network, even though the Canton network just partnered up with them. They're testing things out right there, right now. It's not just going to be XRP. It's going to be a combination of multiple blockchains. What the DTCC does is so big, it can't all be done on one chain. And so, yeah, this is how we get to high prices, of XRP, is we need to settle up for DTCC. We need to settle up derivatives for somebody. We need to be doing cross-border payment flows like 14% of SWIFT that Brad Garlinghouse said. And when you run through those numbers, that's when you can have the conversation about 100, 1,000, and 10,000, right? I think that I was just reading a white paper from the Bank for International Settlements, though. Their timeline is 2027, and they still admit that they're not going to have all of their key goals hit. So, guys, I want XRP to go to $100 next year. I want it to go to $1,000 next year. I want institutional adoption to take place and scale this thing up next year. The problem is that the BIS is on a 2030 timeline. The problem, the Clarity Act might not even get passed in Q1 of next year. Right? If these congressmen and politicians play around doing the DC dance, might not get clarity till later in the year. Shoot, it's a midterm election year. I mean, and so you have to prepare for the worst case scenarios and the risk that you have to be ready for, while understanding here's how we get to $100. Here's how we get to $1,000. Now, as somebody who thought wrongfully that XRP was going to go to $1,000 in 2020. Now, I had no control over this. Ripple had no control, right? They got sued by the SEC. We didn't get Clarity Act in the past few years. We were open to get market structure years ago. Here we are finishing 2025. We still don't have market structure. We thought that the lawsuit was going to get settled up in a year. The lawsuit didn't get settled up till August of this year. And I'm telling you, you can go read the BIS white paper on cross-border payments. They're saying that they're not going to reach their targets till 2027 and 2030. So I wish that I could say, hey, DTCC is going to onboard to the XRP Ledger, Canton Network, and Stellar in the next 12 months, and they're going to flip the switch. And XRP is going to be $100. Stellar is going to go to 20, and Canton's going to go to whatever. They're way behind. And it doesn't appear like they're in a rush. We're in a rush. We want, and that's the key word right there. We want XRP to go to 100 and $1,000. We need XRP to go to 100 and $1,000. They might need it to go to $1,000, but they don't need it to go to $1,000 this year. Crisis can still hit, which starts and accelerates things, right? When we saw what hit in 2020, it accelerated a lot, right? And so we could see a crisis hit, right? Carry trade unwinds, global margin call, right? We could have some big catalysts that hit that spur some things going again. And I think that we're on the brink of it right now. That's why gold and silver are sending the signal. People can sense it. People can sense the vibe that something bad is happening. We might not know what, we might not know exactly where, even though we can see a lot of it. The cracks are widening. You can see them. But that's why I've tempered my expectations, is because I see that these institutions are not in a rush like we are. We want it, like we're rushing to save our country. We're rushing to audit the Federal Reserve, to audit Fort Knox, to get rid of the Federal Reserve, to introduce the Clarity Act. We're rushing and fighting to get all these things done. They're not. They're not. The BIS, go read the cross-border payments update that they just put out last month. And maybe I'll do a video on it. It says for their target goals for how much it's going to cost for cross-border payments, how fast they'll settle up. There's key metrics that they have. And their date is 2027 and 2030. Let's continue. Mitch Nick line about BlackRock, not enough interest in an XRP ETF at this time. XRP ETFs have already raised more than 4 to 6 weeks than iShares iBet did. It's just so true. Such a great point, Dennis. They don't want to show their hand. As soon as BlackRock admits that they're launching an XRP ETF, it's game over. That's the stamp of approval that sends XRP up to double digits right away. Like I said, the BIS isn't ready to do it. BlackRock's not ready to do it. We're ready for $100 XRP. We need $1,000 XRP. They don't need it yet. Will they need it eventually? I do believe so. But they don't need it yet. Brent, is there a chance that most of Ripple's escrow has been pre-sold to companies and governments and will never hit retail? Yes. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And this is the point that I've been making, is that all of their XRP is being sold OTC and only a little bit is trickling down to the centralized exchanges, which, brings us to this next super chat that we just got from Mrs. Claus that is kind of related. She asked right here, where does Coinbase buy it from to sell it to us? Do we know how much Coinbase has left to sell, not including what they hold for us? Thanks for the explanation. It's pretty complicated for newbies, or at least for me. No, it's a question that a lot of people have. A lot of people have this question. Coinbase had less than $1 billion in their main wallets earlier this year. And that number got drained. It went way down. It was at like a 900 million. And then it got drained all the way down to like almost zero. And then they refilled it back up. And so, the only places to get XRP is from the biggest centralized exchanges and market makers and Ripple. That's the only place. If you're looking to get over 100 million XRP, you can't get it from centralized exchanges. I doubt that. I mean, nobody would go to the centralized exchange to fill an order like that anyways. Right? But as far as who has those bags to sell that XRP, it's centralized exchanges, big market makers, OTC desks, which the OTC desks, they are facilitating the transaction between these parties. And it's Ripple. That's it. That's it. There's no market for buying, 100 million, a billion XRP other than some centralized exchanges have that amount. Binance has a lot of XRP. You can go look at Coinbase wallets now. You can track a lot of them, right? And you can see that they do have, a few billion XRP, but most of that's customer XRP. That's the other thing that you have to understand. So even though Binance might have 5 billion XRP, 10 billion XRP, a few billion of that is going to be the clients. In fact, I just had iTrust Capital CEO on, Kevin Maloney, and they have over 1 billion XRP on their platform, I think is what he said. Don't quote me exactly. You have to go watch the interview. But I asked him this question. And I think he said that they have almost 5 billion AUM total, and then about $1 billion of XRP, if I'm not mistaken. Same thing with Caleb and Brown. And I just had Jim on. I aired that interview this morning. And once again, that's client XRP. That's not XRP that they just have freely sitting on the exchange. So the big variable to watch going forward, long story short, is Ripple and their escrow. And as the gentleman had asked before, most of Ripple's escrow is probably pre-allocated to institutions. And retail is lucky to be getting it. Jim McAllister, thank you. Hey, Zach, love you guys and God bless. If I put my company in for resume writing as a plug, could you shout it out? Thanks and Merry Christmas. Absolutely, Jim. Absolutely. Always happy to shout out a good man's company. Appreciate your support. Dennis, who's D Dunny? D Money? Who are you talking about? Oh, 24-hour crypto. That DTCC will be fully tokenized in 50 weeks. Yeah. I think that would be the fast timeline. The best case scenario is the DTCC is tokenized in a year. 6 to 12 months. Once again, without Clarity Act, it's a big hurdle to do a lot of these transactions and activities. There's a lot that they still got to sort out. For some of the simple businesses, they can use crypto now. But, for DeFi, for a lot of these questions that are still up in the air, until we get that Clarity Act, they're going to be holding off. But yeah, I could see the DTCC getting it tokenized in the next year. Yep. Have you looked into Telcoin and what they are doing? I just added them. They're on my coin review list. I haven't made it there yet, but I'm planning on getting to them probably after the Christmas break. After the Christmas break, I'll have my review done on Telcoin. But yeah, I've been watching them. Once in a while, I see news about what they've been working on come across. I don't own any Telcoin, but I know that we have some people in our community that are heavily invested. Oh, Dan Doney is the CTO for the DTCC. Okay. Thank you, Dennis. Okay. Yeah, where was that? I saw that viral clip going around today from the DTCC. Thought I might have.
Global in nature, our participants. So while we're starting the journey in the US, and you notice these tokens, once you issue them and release them, they can move anywhere they want to move to, right? So they become global in nature, and we've taken great pains, if you will, to ensure that wherever jurisdictions they operate in, that they're compliant with the local rules and regulations. But again, we would advise all our participants and users of these tokens to get their own advice as we started this podcast. And you're absolutely right. On the chains, I think you saw yesterday, we announced the first chain that's out there, which is that we've partnered with, which is Canton. To your point, there is not one chain that's going to be able to handle the volumes that we're looking at. So by definition, we will be looking at other.
Unless you have a very high-priced XRP. Right. If you have a high priced XRP, that settlement can take place and that would be able to get it done, right? That is the one thing that I would insert there. With a high priced XRP, we know XRP can scale. We know how cheap it is per transaction, but to be able to settle the dollar amounts and the value, if you had a high priced XRP, I think you could get it done. As far as throughput, you could still run some of that throughput. If the XRP ledger wasn't ready to handle all of the TPS, we still have the ability to create private ledgers. So Ripple could create a private ledger for the DTCC on top of the XRP ledger. Once again, if you give them that high price of XRP, right, you wouldn't need billions and billions of XRP, or maybe with a few billion XRP, and you got it priced at $100 or $1,000, you can start to make sense of that math. But, you know, I think that this is an interesting clip right here because they're admitting that it's not going to be just one chain. So I would run with the assumption that it's not going to be just XRP, which is fine, because this is what I've been saying since 5 years ago when I started making content, is that if we only get slivers of the pie, we go to astronomical prices. If we only get 14% of Swift, like Brad Garlinghouse says, you're talking about 10% of Swift is about 500 to 600 billion per day in volume, because Swift does 5 to 6 trillion daily. So we're talking about volume that has not been seen on any chain before. This is why the DTCC has to pilot and test, and they may have to use a few different blockchains to get the job done. But even if XRP is just getting a piece of this action, you're talking about a very high priced XRP.
Chains, but they need to be, they need to satisfy requirements that are going to make our regulators comfortable that there's nothing funny happening behind the scenes. And I think you guys have seen the stories this week. So, you know, we take great pain to ensure that from a legal and regulatory perspective, all these chains are above board. And what DTCC is working on is to, as we add these chains into our ecosystem, that we would have an orchestration layer that covers it, right? So if you tell me, all right, mint today on Canton, but tomorrow I need you to move it to Stellar or move it to, you know, SWI or wherever we want to go, Ethereum, we'll be able to do that while maintaining the appropriate records. So I think that's going to be super important, and that would be another phase, if you will, of where we'll head. Because yes, the headline today is we're going to tokenize everything. But in my head, it's like, okay, we did that, then what? Right? So we've got to give these tokens mobility, velocity, a purpose. That's where the collateral app chain comes in. This is where some of the orchestration layer comes in. And then working with our participants across the board to create more applications that would add value as we move down the chain.
So I heard her mention Stellar, SWI, and Ethereum. Right? And interoperability being key. And this is why it was very important. And I mentioned this when Ripple issued RLUSD on Ethereum as well, too. Because you want to be able to bridge and have that interoperability. The DTCC is saying the same thing. You want to have purpose to these tokens that are being tokenized on Canton, tokenized on the XRP ledger, on Stellar, right? On these various blockchains. And this is why it's so important, too, that we're getting the multi-purpose token update on the XRP ledger, because this allows you to add additional programmability to the tokens that you're issuing. This is why it's so important for us to get permission DEX, because this would allow the DTCC to have a permission DEX on the XRP ledger for their liquidity, right? As she said, they cannot be on a chain where there's any funny business going on. And even if you're on a public blockchain, right, it's hard to guarantee that that's taking place, which is why you create that permissioned environment, that permission liquidity pool. And I think that this is the setup that DTCC is going to have for utilizing the XRP ledger, right? A combination of either a private ledger or permission DEX, or a combination of the two. Yes, Ripple has about 40%. This has about 40%. Ripple has about 40% of the XRP supply. Yeah, give or take. And so for them to get under the 20% threshold, they're going to have to get rid of it. But this gets interesting too, because they have multiple options for doing this. They can do grants to fund developers. They're talking about adding staking to the XRP ledger, right? Ripple could put up a pool of liquidity, for some sort of staking rewards. Ripple has digital asset treasury company Evernorth that they could give XRP to over there. And then plenty of pre-allocation contracts that get executed as well too. Absolutely. And so I love the fact that the Clarity Act is kind of accelerating this process for Ripple distributing XRP to their institutional partners. This is very bullish. Okay, we got another question coming in here. Oh, yeah, Brent. What do you think the reason that Ripple seems to be releasing just enough XRP to keep the price around $2, just to keep them from looking like a security? Well, they already know that XRP is not a security. So, as long as they're selling XRP, essentially, they have no problem selling it as long as it's not wrapped up in an investment contract, right? So, there's no concern for Ripple as far as them getting in trouble for, selling any securities going forward. They know what was a security. The judge said institutional clients that were buying it through an investment contract. So Ripple can now sell through OTC desks to institutional clients without having any concerns. They can sell it to the ETF issuers. They can sell it to their institutional partners. They could even sell it to centralized exchanges programmatically. That was also ruled not to be a security. So Ripple has clarity on how to sell XRP going forward without it being seen as a security. That's not a concern of them anymore. I would say this. The reason why XRP is stagnant right now is because if you look at the centralized exchanges, we have nothing but outflows taking place. Now, you could say that Ripple's releasing just enough to keep the price suppressed, in the sense that the ETF issuers are getting some XRP from Ripple. That makes sense. But the other thing is that Ripple's not forcing anybody to sell their XRP on the centralized exchanges, right? We're doing that. And when I say we're, I'm talking about retail investors. I'm not selling XRP. You're not selling XRP, hopefully not. But people are. There's 800 million of outflows in the month of November. That's why XRP is down. Now, if Ripple wasn't selling XRP to these ETF issuers, would the price of XRP go up? Yes. And so, yeah, I would argue that, sure, Ripple is keeping XRP suppressed for now, but I have good word directly from the source that would have the answer that they don't want to sell XRP anymore. They want to stop selling XRP. That's something that I heard directly from an employee at Ripple. And it's also something that I heard from somebody who would have the answer, is that they don't want to sell XRP anymore. And so I think that, yeah, they're, keeping things kind of under wraps right now, but eventually they let this thing go. And you're not going to want to be 1 hour or 1 day late to when that happens, because XRP is going to be in a fundamentally different reality, price-wise. What is your opinion on Stronghold? I still see upside on it. I just reviewed it today for my Discord group. And so the list of coins that I reviewed today for the Discord was Stronghold, Swiftcoin, ZBCN, Canton Network, Polygon, and Helium. And so if you want to see my targets and everything on that, I shared it with the Discord community. The simple answer for Stronghold that I'll just say publicly right here is that they need more institutional adoption. Right? They have had good partners in the past. IBM was one, but the IBM partnership has ended. Right? And so Stronghold is just like so many of these other companies where it needs more institutional adoption. We need more contracts on paper signed to use the token. The other thing that I'm concerned about with Stronghold is that they did lock up 60 billion in escrow, which is great. 60 billion tokens locked up. The total supply is 100 billion, just like XRP. But they still have about 34 billion tokens in their possession that they can do whatever they want with. And so I worry about that. Because without ETFs and digital asset treasury companies that are going to eat up that supply, what's going to happen with those tokens? This is the difference where Ripple can sell off their XRP without impacting the price negatively. Yes, we're not getting the supply shock right now from the ETFs in particular, because the ETF issuers have been able to get some XRP from Ripple, but it's not causing the price to go down. The reason why the price is going down is because people are selling on the centralized exchanges. That's the price that we see. The price of XRP is a reflection of the activity taking place on the centralized exchanges. And so, when retail decides to come back, it'll start to move. And the other thing that will move it is when the dark pools and OTC dries up. If that does happen, which it will. Because then they're going to be forced to go to the centralized exchanges as well. They'll be standing in line with us, right beside us, to get XRP off the centralized exchanges. Even if the transaction's OTC. See, the centralized exchange can sell publicly to you and me, but if there's no more XRP to go around other than there's centralized exchanges that are sitting on a stash, that buyer could go OTC and the centralized exchange could be on the other side of that transaction, but they're going to be taking, a billion XRP from that. Let's say it's Coinbase. So that would drive the price of XRP up as well too. So Clarity Act is kind of a flip of the switch. I think that we get a price run up before Clarity Act. So I've already said this, made myself very clear. We will get a run up before Clarity Act. The reason why we didn't get as much of a buy the rumor, sell the news on the ETF for XRP is because of the government shutdown, and it came unexpectedly. When the SEC gave the guidance on the 20-day window, if you remove the delay clause, it starts the 20-day countdown, and then you can go live effectively after the 20-day period expires. That caught the market off guard. So instead of having like months where everybody knew that, the ETFs were going to go live and they could bid it up, that didn't happen because the government shut down and then the ETFs went live unexpectedly. The Clarity Act is not going to get signed unexpectedly. And so I firmly believe that you'll see a run up before the Clarity Act. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that people are going to make is not buying enough XRP before the Clarity Act gets signed. They're thinking that they can wait till the Clarity Act gets signed and then buy XRP. And that's what retail, normies are going to do who aren't in crypto now, is they're going to wait for CNN to tell them, oh, Clarity Act just got signed. Oh, my financial advisor just gave me a call and he said that he has a nice little ETF for me to invest in. Okay. They're going to buy the tops. They're going to buy the top. Smart money is buying right now. Institutions are buying right now. Clarity Act hopefully gets done in Q1 of 2026. What do I think about Senator Loomis retiring? I think it's good. I think that she's been part of the problem. I think that she's tried to shill and push Bitcoin too hard instead of working on behalf of the entire industry. And she's put so much of her attention into the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, which I think has actually been a net negative conversation, the way that it's been facilitated with the context that her and other Bitcoin maxis have put around that conversation, I think has actually been a detriment to getting Clarity Act passed and to getting a crypto strategic reserve implemented. It never should have been a conversation of Bitcoin strategic reserve. It should have been crypto strategic reserve. Now, I'm saying that as somebody who doesn't own Bitcoin, but I also don't think that we should sell off our Bitcoin either. I'm fine with us holding it. And, the criminals like to use Bitcoin. Let's go get a bunch more Bitcoin from them. That's great. The strategic reserve conversation and the Clarity Act would be much further along if it wasn't for the likes of Senator Loomis and others that I think were more focused on serving their own interest versus the industry as a whole. Solid point, Zach, on buying before the Clarity Act. This is how this always works. And people make this mistake time after time again. I knew that I was buying Canton after the DTCC news came out and that it probably wasn't the best time to buy. But, I wanted to get myself a little bag, so I bought some. I'm not going to name the platform that I bought it on, but they hit me with 3% spread. So that wasn't cool. But I was waiting for Caleb and Brown to get Canton, and as Jim reported to us, they went live with it yesterday. So I should have just waited to buy my Canton on Caleb and Brown instead of getting hit with the 3% spread plus the other limitations and trading fees that the other platform charges me. But I was antsy, and I bought into Canton just to get myself a little bag. I had a little bit of money on the platform, and so I figured, what the heck. But Canton is now available on Caleb and Brown. And Jim let me know that we've had quite a few people sign up with Caleb and Brown. If you guys have any questions at all, go look at the video that I dropped this morning. It was a market update with Jim from Caleb and Brown. And he put his email, he allowed me to put his email in the description. If you have any questions at all, any concerns, there's been a lot of misinformation going on about Caleb and Brown, which is unfortunate. But just go directly to the source. It's free to set up an account. It's free institutional grade custody. There's a reason why thousands of people in our community love their platform. And I myself am a client, and I've had nothing but a great experience. So go check that out. What state are they from? So they have an office in Florida, and they now do have a U.S. entity. That was one of the big concerns that people had with Caleb and Brown, was their original company is based out of Australia. But what they've done is they've set up another legal entity in the States. They have an office in Florida, and they have plans to actually add more offices in America. And they have licenses in all 49 states. The only state that they don't have a license in is New York. And they have a banking relationship now here in the States as well, too. So you don't have to worry about that. And they have full bankruptcy remote protection. The institutional grade custody that they use is Fireblocks, which is top of the industry. They now have an app, and you can use the desktop as well, too. Yeah, they have both. I haven't used their app yet. Yeah, we need Senator Warren to get out of there too. Absolutely. Did ZBCN get added to the ISO list? Yes. Yep, they made their coin ISO. Yeah, which technically is not the right answer. It's not the right wording. I'm not even going to get into the technicalities of it. Zebek is an ISO coin. I don't care to waste time anymore on, the technicality. Because technically, the messages are ISO compliant. The token itself is not. It's a stupid technical nuance. It's a waste of time to discuss. Don't play around out here. Lil P, thank you. Zach, what's up with all the hate towards Jake? I have no hate, man. I've just had to clear myself of, I'm not the guy that predicted $100 or $1,000 this year. You guys would be shocked at how many people thinking that I said XRP was going to 100 or $1,000 this year. Like, I'm talking about dozens upon dozens of comments of people saying, hey, how's that $100 XRP playing out? Like, dozens of comments. I'm not making this up. And so, no hate, just, making it clear that I never thought that we were going to go to $100 this year. Right. And then, that's it. I think that people are, have the ability to go check out his platform, what they've done, what they plan on doing, and they get to line their platform up with everybody else, which is all I've ever wanted to do. It's all I've ever wanted to do, is just to say, hey, Digital Wealth Partners is doing some things here. We have, Flare that's doing it decentralized. We have Doppler that's doing it more centralized. There's options out here. And as somebody who reports on XRP and crypto markets for a living, it is my job to just say, hey, here are the facts about all of these platforms. Here's what they're claiming. Here's what they're actually doing. Here's what they're claiming. Here's what they're actually doing. And that's all I've ever tried to want to do. That's it. Yeah, no hate for me. He's got his platform. I got mine, completely separate. And that's good. That's great. No, yeah, Zach, you said $7 to $15. I did. Yeah, absolutely. We didn't hit my targets either, right? So once again, I have accountability for that. I have a great explanation for why that didn't happen, which is very simple. The case went till August. Right here, right at the bottom, August 22nd, 2025. Case went till August, which caused the ETFs not to go live till November, and then we still don't have Clarity Act passed. Right? When I was talking about XRP going to $7 to $15 this year, the case ended at the start of the year instead of Gary Gensler filing an appeal January 15th. The ETFs were going to go live earlier this year. That didn't happen because this case went till August, and then the government shut down, which caused our ETFs to get delayed till November. And then we still don't have a Clarity Act passed. So no institutional adoption or institutional utility at scale. ETFs didn't arrive till November 13th. And then the case hung over us till August. And the other thing that I did underestimate was the Fed keeping rates higher for longer and also conducting quantitative tightening for as long as they did. So that was what was wrong in my analysis. And so I said, happy to be accountable to that. And I was laughing last night while I was taking my shower. I was listening to Tom Lee on CNBC. And it was a segment where they had pulled in and then they were breaking down how they had basically surveyed 15 of the top banks and financial institutions about what their targets were for the S&P 500 in 2026. And I was kind of just laughing about it because I'm thinking to myself, people don't realize, like, I analyze not just crypto, but broader financial markets for a living. Part of that is I do like to make calls on where I see it going in the direction that it's heading. That's what makes analysis alpha. That's what makes it good and valuable, right? If I wanted to just read off a teleprompter for a living, I would be working for CNBC. I would be working for somebody else, right? I would be owned and controlled by a platform of just a bunch of sponsors who controlled what I said. And I would just read off a teleprompter. Oh, here's today's news. Let's cut to break. Shill the sponsors. That's not what I do for a living. That's not what I enjoy. And all of these analysts that put out targets, just because they miss one year doesn't mean that they're not going to put out a target for next year. That's their job, is to put out a target. And if people don't want to pay attention to my targets, they don't have to, right? I never said my targets were going to hit 100%. I said I felt very confident in them. I never told anybody take out a loan, because XRP is going to $7 or $15 this year. I did think that XRP was definitely going to go to at least 7 to 15, and I thought it could even go up to 20. And I said 20 to $30 max. Here we are at $2. This market has a way of humbling you. That's fine. We're going to keep swinging. And people want to take that and say, well, you've been wrong about everything. This is just one example of something that we were right about, right? And you can be wrong on something for, longer than is rational, longer than you can stay liquid. That's the famous saying in these markets, is these markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. The good thing that I've always said, though, is that we, don't overinvest. Don't over leverage yourself. Make sure that you focus on income first and foremost before you get to investments, so that you're not relying on XRP going to $20 or $100 this year. And so, yeah, I think that we're all taking a beating right now. If you put out crypto content, people are not happy. But I've been through this before. And I've left my platform open. My chat's open. Now, that's what I've always wanted to have for a platform of free speech, of transparency. I tell you what I'm invested in. You tell me what you're invested in. We win some, we lose some, but together we learn, together we grow. That's what my platform is supposed to be about. A lot of guys run away. And I've seen this before. I never left. Not going to leave. And at the end of the day, the numbers speak for ourselves. There's a reason why our platform does continue to grow. Any additional news on Axelar, your take on Wormhole? Yeah, I'm bullish on Axelar still. I did just load up on some more Axelar. Excited what the team's been putting out there too. Wormhole I don't own, and I still have to look into more of what they're working on over there. I haven't made an investment in Wormhole yet. But the interoperability, and the bridges that are being built right now to the XRP ledger are very important. So I'm very excited about that in regards to Wormhole and Axelar. Very bullish. Okay. But guys, hey, I think I'm going to wrap up this session here. It's always a pleasure. Hope everybody has a fantastic Christmas and holidays, whatever you're doing this time of year. I know that our Christmas is going to be a lot of fun for us. We're going to be hosting our family, and then tomorrow for Christmas Eve, we're going to have another family dinner. So a lot of time with family for me over the next couple days. I'll probably try to get out a couple updates, but just want to say thank you. I hope everybody has a great Christmas. Despite the market being down, let's go take some time with our family, with our loved ones, to remember, what's most important. As always, appreciate your support. Thank you for liking our content, sharing it out. All of our community resources are available at zachrector.com. And I think that I'm going to have a couple updates coming out later this week that you guys will be interested in, talking about the Clarity Act and what this means for Ripple and their escrow. I'm really looking forward to putting that video together. As I mentioned earlier in the stream, I did just put out my coin reviews for 6 more cryptocurrencies. So if you're looking to get tapped in with our private group, we have weekly calls every Saturday. You get additional insights and content from me, as well as my coin reviews, my holdings, my exit targets. I don't give financial advice, but I share what I'm doing, fully and completely transparent. And then we just have a community of like-minded individuals over there that I think you guys would appreciate. So head on over to Patreon to get signed up and access to our Discord group. We would love to have you in the family. And with that being said, I hope everybody has a fantastic Christmas. Go tell your loved ones about XRP and have a good one out there, okay? God bless all of you guys. Thank you so much.